Welcome everyone to How to Leverage Salesforce for Major Gifts Success. Welcome Paul and Richard. I'm going to pass this over to you to take it away.
Thank you, Karen. Appreciate that. So I'm just going to introduce myself, and then Paul can kind of get into who he is. He's been a longtime friend and associate of ours, and it's just good to be on this session with you, Paul, to talk about this very, very important topic. But I'm the founder of Veritus Group, and I've been doing this. I mean, if I had my hair, you could see that I was an old guy. But I've been doing this for 40 years, helping nonprofits really move the needle in terms of raising money and doing it in a donor-centered way. Paul, why don't you introduce yourself?
Certainly, and thank you, Richard. It's a pleasure to be able to speak with you today. I'm excited for today's conversation. Yeah, my name is Paul Selway. As you can probably tell, I'm from England, not the USA. Moved here in 1997. I have a strong background in technology, and the last 20 years it's been moving in the direction of cloud technology. And since 2009, been working with nonprofits and helping Salesforce add features and capabilities to the Salesforce nonprofit cloud. I'm actually a Salesforce architect as well, so I'm passionate about creating solutions that meet the needs of our nonprofit customers, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
It's a lot of great talent. I mean, and this is the first effort that we've had where we combine this whole area of data and data management with strategy, fundraising strategy. So here's what we're going to cover in this session today. Well, I want to talk about the major gifts pipeline, and that's important because it's tracking donors all the way from acquisition through to planned giving, capital gifts, etc. So the importance of creating and managing that. And then secondly, how we're going to talk about how Salesforce, when it's coupled with the right strategy and the right approaches, which we believe that we have and we've proven to be successful, that it actually creates success in your fundraising programs. And then how to use data to actually enhance those relationships. I mean, Paul and I have talked quite a bit about this. It's data is actually no good at all unless it actually helps enhance and further the cause of fundraising and the cause of the organization. And so this is why we've decided to approach this topic in this way, to talk about how to incorporate the two, strategy and data. Just a brief note about who Veritus Group is. We're a mid and major and plan giving training and consulting agency. And we're committed to transforming fundraising programs to deliver really measurable impact to both the donor and to the clients and organizations that we serve. So we've had, I mean, I think in our organization, Paul, we probably have collectively over 100, 200 years of experience in the nonprofit world and in the fundraising world. And so we're very committed to making sure that everything that we do helps the donor fulfill their passions and interests in the area that they care about. Like I said earlier, our whole thing is about data and being donor-centered. So that's a passion of ours, which is why I just love being with Paul and his team and talking with them, because they're all about data and how to manage it to further relationships. And we're all about data to manage it to further relationships with donors as well. A little bit about our approach, and then I'm going to pass it over to Paul to talk about who Redpath is. But what we do in the major gift field and in the mid-level field is we make sure that you're building a caseload with the right donors. Here's the interesting thing about this whole area. Only 1 out of every 3 donors who meet the metric of a major gift actually wants to relate to you personally. So what we find all across the country is our caseloads that have donors that don't want to relate. 2/3 of them don't want to relate. So we're focused on making sure that the client and the major gift officer, the plan giving officer, is talking to the right donors. Secondly, this whole orientation of identifying passions and interests and communication preferences is so important, which is why data, the role of data is so important, because we've got to track all of that. So it's passions and interests and communication preferences that drive the relationship. And then, of course, having a personalized communication plan, rather than just a general plan for the donors, make it very personal, having goals for every donor, and then establishing a management approach that evaluates, that holds people accountable to make sure that we're performing in an effective way with the resources of the organization to further the cause of the organization. So that's kind of a top line view of the strategy and approach. So Paul, tell us about who Redpath is.
Yeah, Redpath is actually a family name. It's my grandmother's name, Redpath. It's a little village in Scotland. I think it's a tribe. We even have our own clan colors, so that's good.
Wow.
But Redpath is a consulting group started in 2009, and we quickly became a Salesforce partner then. And one of our first customers was a nonprofit, and they're still a customer today, which is very exciting to watch them grow. And we began working with Salesforce to build out what's known as the nonprofit cloud. It started as a nonprofit success pack on top of the relationship management database that they had, and now it's a fully blown cloud that deals with a number of things. So that's who Redpath is. Collectively, I think we have the similar amount of experience to you, but we offer kind of advisory services and implementation services. Often customers are moving from other systems or spreadsheets. Our real goal is to simplify and accelerate that transformational change. Especially now with the environment as it is, it's not as easy to have those in-person interactions to build relationships. And it's not easy if you can't actually get to your systems because they're in an office and you can't go there. So one of the things we look to is really to empower the nonprofit in their mission. And our approach is kind of similar. We take a people, process, then technology and data approach, but we look at it holistically. Great technology is not very good if you don't have a good plan and if you don't store the right data, because you won't be able to measure your impact and results. So we do leverage the Salesforce relationship management platform and the nonprofit cloud. It's a very donor-centric model. Everything in it is centered around the donor and around the stakeholders and constituents. It's very secure and it's accessible from anywhere. If you've got an internet connection on a phone, a tablet, or a computer, you have access, which is really important because a lot of systems we found in our nonprofit clients are on a server in the office, and it's a bit troublesome to try to get to it when you're not allowed in the office. The other thing about our approach is we do look for robust data management, so we can capture the data that's important to your personalized communication plan, your qualification process, and really understanding and capturing the needs and the desires and passions and communication preferences of your donors. And we know that donor engagement plans have to be personalized. Not every donor is the same. And we also know that it's important that as you work through the process of moving your donor through your pipeline and deciding what level they can be at, that you need to be able to capture all the communications and activities that's happened with that donor. And one of the things I like, in fact, is you can see their giving, you can see their donor relationships, who they know and who they work with. And not only that, once you've got that data, you can use it to make data-driven decisions, either automatically or from alerts. So it's really allowing you to manage your process and your plan at scale. So that's how we approach things.
Great, thank you, Paul. And we're going to get into more detail about all of that in just a second. But one thing I wanted to cover before we pass it back over to Paul is two areas. I mean, there's actually two areas, not one thing, that have to do, that are strategic elements of relationship management that require data support. And one is the healthy pipeline, which I'm going to talk about first. And then the second thing is a personalized donor plan, a personal donor plan that Paul referred to here. So first of all, about the healthy pipeline. It's really interesting to Jeff and me, my business partner, that when we go in to talk to a client, somebody will say, well, we want to start a major gifts program, or we want to start a mid-level program. And we say, well, how's your acquisition program going? Well, we don't have one. And Paul, I'm sure you've seen in the years that you've been doing this that in some cases people don't have a healthy pipeline, and there's an expectation to deliver major revenue or to secure major revenue from wealthy or high capacity donors, and there is no actual pipeline that occurs. So I want to just talk briefly about this to show you why it's important to have the pipeline, but also why it's important to have the data support, like the kind that Salesforce can provide and Redpath can provide to make all of this happen in a seamless way. In the donor acquisition field, which is the first part, you absolutely have to be proactively looking for donors and securing them and bringing them into the organization. And oftentimes you're doing that in the first cycle at a loss. You could expect a return of 50 cents on the dollar or 75 cents on the dollar. So you won't even break even on the first cycle. And these acquisition programs need to be diverse. We've seen so many files where there isn't a donor acquisition program, which then means that there isn't actually a very robust cultivation program, mid-level program, and major gift program. If you have a good donor acquisition program, then it follows that you have to have a really good cultivation program, which is usually a direct marketing program that is very, very data dependent. And in that area, you can expect a return of 3 to 1, 4 to 1, mostly direct response. And it's what we call one-to-many relationships, heavily data dependent in order to manage that. I'm actually not an expert in the data area like Paul is, but it's like keeping track of every single detail and managing all the cohorts and groups within the cultivation in that general donor population. Moving through the pipeline, then you go to mid-level, which is a higher cum giving per year, where you can expect a higher return, 4 to 1, 6 to 1. And this is what we call one-to-some relationships. There's some personalization and some specific touch points that are planned, and the donors are tiered depending on their capacity and their inclination. There's a caseload size of 500 to 700, and we always suggest that you have a mid-level officer, which is what MLO stands for, that handles that caseload of donors. This is a very critical part of the pipeline that must be in place. The next part of the pipeline is, of course, major gifts, where you can expect a return of 4 to 1 to 12 to 1 in a mature program. And this is what we call one-to-one relationships. Caseload size is 150 donors. And here, and this is the area, Paul, and this is why we've been talking about this for a number of months. This is the area where there isn't much data support, even though Paul's going to actually address how he approaches it and how their organization and company approaches it. But what we found is we've had to do a lot of this stuff manually in order to actually track the individual donor plans and strategies and their goals and their communication preferences and all that stuff. and manage the relationship, mostly by more manual kind of efforts. So this major gifts area, which can produce a substantial amount of net revenue for the organization, is an area that really, really needs the kind of help that that Redpath can provide. And of course, you've got planned gifts where ROI varies significantly, and it's a longer term strategy. There's a whole bunch of data support and systems that are required to keep that whole thing going. Again, banking on a really healthy pipeline up into that point, and then finally capital gifts, which as all of us on this webinar know, can deliver, in addition to planned gifts, can deliver some very high net revenue. Now, what does a pipeline actually look like? So I went and I actually produced here a sample of a pipeline, what it looks like for an organization. And you see the various years there, 2018, 2019, 2020, and the donor count by cum giving level over there on the left side. Now I'm wondering if you can discern what's wrong with this pipeline. I mean, they've got a lot of donors, 160,000 donors, or 220,000 donors in 2020, who gave $50 million. But there's something actually drastically wrong with this pipeline. And here's what it is there's a disproportionate number of donors down in the lower end of the file, from 1,000 down or 5,000 down, and not as many in the upper end of the file. Why? Now, by the way, we're not suggesting there should be a huge amount of donors up on the upper end of the file, because that's not even possible. But the reason that this is happening is because there's not good strategies in place to manage the donors moving forward. And furthermore, there's not good data management in order to actually manage the donors, which is why we're on this webinar talking about this. So this is the whole area of a healthy pipeline. Very briefly, I just want to talk about a donor engagement plan and why that's important as well. A donor engagement plan is basically a way to, it's a planning tool. It doesn't replace your database. In fact, data actually supports it. But it's a way to manage individual donors in your organization in a respectful way that is personal to them. Now, here's why we created the donor engagement plan, which we call the DEP. What it does at a glance is you can view all donors and all the communication plans. It's cash flowing all the donor goals. So like if you have a goal for a donor of 25,000, 24,000, or whatever amount you have a goal for, it's actually cash flowing those as to when you're going to expect those funds to be given. It's tracking a qualification process, because you remember what earlier I said that 1 out of every 3 donors actually qualifies to be on a caseload by their choice, not our choice. So it's tracking the qualification process, and it basically tells you when donors can be removed or added. And you can keep easy notes on donor preferences and interests and all that kind of stuff. Now, how does this DEP, or the donor engagement plan, differ from your database? Well, the donor engagement plan is future focused, whereas the database itself is looking back at what happened. Although Paul would say, as would his team, well, you can use data to actually forecast the future, which a very good data management company will do. A donor engagement plan is for the cliff notes. I mean, it basically tracks all the bigger details, whereas your database is for all the smaller details. The DEP is where you can easily adjust your plan. You know, you're saying, well, Bob Smith decided he was going to do this instead of that, or he's expressed interest in this area or that area, and you just change your plan. A database actually shows you what already happened. And The last thing is a donor engagement plan is where you can do real-time tracking of your cash flow goal. Now, one of our intentions here is to put all of this into a database and a software, a data management program, which is what we've been talking to Paul and his team about. So the question is can you use Salesforce to combine all this communication strategy that I've been talking about into a donor engagement plan in your database? And the answer is yes, you can. You've just got to consider several things. You know, what are your goals are, how you collaborate with your internal team to identify what's needed, looking at your database system and seeing what it's capable of, and then of course finding the right partner. So before I pass it over to Paul, I just wanted to say tell you what Veritus Group offers in terms of consulting. What we bring is a donor-centered and data-driven structure to help your team be accountable in their work and focus on the right donors and develop meaningful relationships and working their plan. And how that works is we analyze the data that you have in terms of the donor data and figure out how many major gift officers, how many mid-level officers, how many plan gift officers should be in your organization. And there's a whole system to that to figure that out. And then a Veritus coach meets with those fundraisers and implements this system that I've been talking about, which then reports into management. Now, someone might say, well, is that really worth it? The cost of working with us is a flat fee, typically. I mean, it's like only a certain percentage of the MGO's caseload value. And on average, we help fundraisers grow their value by 30% in the first 2 years, which kind of easily pays for our work. So if anybody that's on this webinar is interested in that, you've got the contact information there. One of our clients, Allison Rabbit from the Director of Development Seattle Opera, said about us, "It has been invaluable to have Veritus keep our activity and attention focused on building donor relationships and raising investment in a way that aligns the donor interests and passions to the projects that Seattle Opera delivers. Their trainings, their guidance, and their support have been crucial to our success." And I should mention that even during this COVID period, the Seattle Opera actually went forward in their fundraising because of the strategies that we used. So that concludes my portion of the strategy communication side. And I'm going to hand it over to Paul now to talk about using Salesforce for major gift success.
Thank you so much, Richard. I think you've set the stage wonderful. It looks great to talk about the process, the plans, the communication, that the ability to qualify your donors. Not all donors are equal. So with no further ado, I'll talk to you a little bit more about the Salesforce Nonprofit Cloud. And the Salesforce Nonprofit Cloud is a database. It's in the cloud. It's available and accessible from everywhere. It's the donor-centric digital-first model, and it has a number of core elements. One is fundraising, and fundraising across all of the spectrum, from individuals all the way up to capital gifts and soft gifts. The other one is engagement. This is where the communication comes in, and that ability to do mass personalization, and the ability to do one-to-one personalization as well as you move people up the tiers and move those donors to become major givers. It also can do program management, but today and grants management. But today we're really focusing on the left side here, that fundraising and an engagement piece. Now, as we talk about donor-centric data, sounds like a big word. What does it mean? Well, the entire relational management database is actually had its upbringings in us as a sales tool, relational management tool. And donors in this case would be the customers, and that you would be working with, and you'd have all the things you'd expect in a sales organization, like forecasting the future, setting goals and quotas, be able to look at the pipeline, and and to be able to use artificial intelligence to tell you which donor might be more qualified than the other donor, and to give you some guidance. So some of the ways it organizes things, it organizes people in households. So you know not only the donor, but you know all the other people in their households, you know what organizations they're connected to, and you know what relationships they have with other households and organizations. So you're beginning to build a rich set of data about your donors. You've got them attached to engagement plans, and you've got them targeted for certain giving levels. You can see what they are giving at and what they're capable of delivering at. And you can manage campaigns. So you can add donors, a set of like donors, to a campaign list and send out mass personalized marketing to them and communications. And you can do it in any channel you want. It can be email, it can be text, or you can even have a calling campaign. And you monitor every activity and communication with those donors, so everyone can see what communications have happened and when they've happened. And so that's kind of the way that we manage donors in the database. And we use opportunities, which are really the gifts. That's the money element of when they've given. So we can measure return on investment of your campaigns. We can measure your profitability. Richard mentioned that in the early acquisition stage, the profitability maybe is you're losing 50 cents on the dollar. Mm-hmm. But you can measure the effectiveness of that. So working the donor engagement plan, many of you may have heard the concept of moves management. It's a common approach where you identify the donor's ability to give. You've acquired the donor, you're now evaluating them. You qualify them, and as Richard mentioned earlier, qualification of your donors is crucial. Not all donors are equal. Not all donors will want to engage with your mission and organization and build a relationship with you. And even if they meet your ideal donor profile, does not necessarily make them a qualified donor. And so using data to help you there and ranking those donors lets you manage the right caseload, not just the ones on your list. And then obviously you've got to cultivate those donors and prepare them for a bigger ask. You know, the initial ask, and then you move them up the levels. And obviously having enough information and building an authentic relationship to know when to make that ask. And then obviously once they're giving, you have to be a good steward. You want to keep giving, because there's a high cost to getting someone to being a major donor. So yeah, we can score donors and based on engagement scores and levels. So we talked a lot about data. I get excited about data. I'm a little bit of a data geek. To me, decisions made without data may or may not have fidelity. And so I love data-driven decisions. I love systems with data to tell me when I need to do something as well. Because I found if you've got one process encapsulated in a system, it's repeatable, and you've got good data, if the process is not working, you fix it once for everyone, and everyone gets lifted up. The other thing is you can automate that process when it makes sense to make you be able to move at scale without having to do everything manually, which Richard talked about earlier. That just limits your caseload, and it also is more error prone. So you get less, the outcomes are less. And then obviously to be able to see what's happening, both what did happen and what you intended to happen, the forecast of what that pipeline should have been, and to see if the cash goals are coming in the time frame that you expected, because that money is critical to your mission. And to be able to see that visually in dashboards detailed in reports, and be able to have artificial intelligence looking at it and saying, you know, there's a higher propensity for this donor to progress than that one based on all the donors that preceded them. So it's learning a little bit about what the profile of an ideal donor is. And then finally, a lot of people are visual. I'm visual. I prefer pictures to words. It has a relationship viewer. So if I had Richard in my database, I could see that he knew Paul, myself. I could see he knew Jeff, and I could see his household. I could see the organizations he's worked with. And I'm beginning to pick up a really good visual of who Richard is, who's he's connected to, likely what he's interested in. So yeah, part of having that data is it gives you it gives you an edge. It gives you the ability to make authentic relationships quicker and with more fidelity and more likelihood of success. So some of the best practices, and Richard's talked about this before, it is about the people. Our donors aren't ATMs. Our donors are people, and they have true interests and passions. And what they get out about get out of giving is not a financial transaction to them. It has got a much deeper personal meaning to them, and it aligns with their interests and passions, and their desires and what they want to see happen. And some donors, they don't even want to be recognized, and they prefer you didn't. And other donors want to be really in your organization and working with you, and to understand those personal preferences and communication styles is important. So we first look at the people part of it. Then we look at the process, and that process impacts our nonprofit employees, the major gift officers, the general fundraisers, communications and engagement. The processes have to be friendly, and they have to be simple as they can be, because there's many systems out there that you have to change the way you do things to the way the system tells you you've got to do it. Now, how do we leverage Veritus and Richard's deep knowledge if the system says that's all very good, but you've got to do it our way? That's why I love Salesforce. You can configure it to have the engagement plan you need, the communication strategy you need, and the enriched data that you need. So once we understand the people and your process, then we look to say, how do we put the right technology in place to enable that? And we close the loop by saying, what data are you going to need to collect to be successful? So some of the benefits of this is you get that single repeatable process, and that process can be improved over time. When you improve it, it's improved for everybody. And when you improve it again, it improves for everybody. Everyone's not doing their own thing. So you can start to look at all your major gift officers, your fundraisers, and they're on a level playing field because they're doing it the same way. You can improve impact. You can see what's working, what isn't, and do more of what's working and less of what isn't. And you can see that impact go up. And the important thing is, could you do this with spreadsheets? Absolutely. Could you do it with a pen and paper? Not a problem. Can you do it at scale with high fidelity, no errors? Probably not. The human costs go up very fast and the quality drops. And the other thing is, can you visualize it? Well, if you've got 15, 20, 30 spreadsheets, which I believe every time we get rid of a spreadsheet, another angel comes in with new wings. It's just a wonderful thing to see these spreadsheets go away. That visibility is important at your executive level, at your functional level, and at your individual employee level. And not only that, it's something you can share with your donors and they can see their impact. And that's powerful. And if you've got a single process that everyone's trained on, the adoption tends to go up. If everyone says, do your own thing, yeah, you've got 100% adoption, but you're not quite sure of what. So that's an important thing. So working with Redpath, what does it look like? What we offer is we keep your donors at the center of your mission. And working with our team, we create a sustainable solution for you. We leverage the nonprofit cloud. Our team was part of the team that added features and recommendations to that product, and that product continues to iterate. It's industry leading. I think last time I looked, 40,000 nonprofits globally rely on Salesforce to drive their fundraising and other parts of their operations. It's the world's #1 relationship management package, which that's a pretty nice platform to be able to work on. How does it work? As mentioned before, people process first, understand your vision, the technology vision, and then configure Salesforce to optimize your fundraising for your caseload and optimize your donor engagement plans and communications. And as I mentioned earlier, much more. Got to start somewhere though, and the best place to start is fundraising. Is it worth it? I have worked with a lot of nonprofits, and they say, we can't spend money on technology. We've got to spend our money on our constituents. Well, if you can scale your mission with technology, it makes sense. Much like with consulting advice, best practice. If you can make your processes much better and your approach is much better, all your constituents do well. And it's that mindset that we try to help you with. 85% of nonprofits that have adopted Salesforce have outperformed what they did before. And in fact, that digital maturity in nonprofits is critical. So, I mean, if this is something you're interested in, whether you're using Salesforce already or another technology and you're interested in alternatives, please reach out to Eric. His contact information is here. So we've recently finished a project with a local Catholic Charities of St. Paul in Minneapolis. Now, Haley Mueller, the VP of Development, she said, our experience with Redpath has been nothing short of fabulous. I couldn't have written a better comment, so I was excited to see this. She said the expertise of the team coupled with their approachable style made them a perfect partner for us. And our approach to working with people is we're not going to do it to you. We're going to do it with you as a partnership. And that is so important. I have been the recipient of change when I've not been involved, and I don't like it. And generally, I don't think anyone else does.
Well, thanks, Paul. I mean, it's obvious that you've got the priorities right, that it's about the people and then it's about the process and the data. And that's exactly with us, the same thing. It's about the donor and fulfilling their interests and passions. And then it's about their money. And how we actually use that in conjunction with them, in a positive, authentic relationship with them to further the cause that we're both interested in. And the proper data and software support is really important for that. So we're going to move now to the questions section. And Karen, did you have something for us?
Yes, and I've got a number of questions about Salesforce for Paul. And a couple people, Paul, have asked, are we going to be able to see how Salesforce looks, specifically the most management system in Salesforce, examples of dashboards, reports, etc.? Are we able to bring any of that up, or is it better just to chat about it in this presentation?
Yeah, what I would suggest is feel free to reach out to Eric. We can provide pre-recorded information on that. If they'd like, Eric would be more than happy to bring some of our nonprofit experts in to do a custom demo for you. But please feel free to go to salesforce.org There's a lot of pre-recorded information there. And I'd like to point out that the first 10 enterprise licenses of this package are free. And then you pay a discounted license fee for more than 10 users. So there's a pretty low barrier to entering the, getting the software and playing with it and seeing how it can help you. But yeah, more than happy, just reach out. We can set something up for you, or if you'd prefer, point you to resources so you could look at yourself.
Thank you. A lot more questions here. Laura says, does Salesforce have a phone app?
Salesforce has Salesforce Dialer. So you can actually dial and record voice conversation, especially if you're doing a capital calling campaign. And you can even have managers listen in and coach people as well. It also has a thing called an app exchange. So if any of you are familiar with your mobile phones, you've got the Apple Store, you've got the Google Store, but the third largest store out there after those two is the Salesforce App Exchange. And there's thousands of apps there, some free and some paid for. And there's many dialing solutions there. There's also solutions to add SMS texting, event management, and a whole host of other things. Just go there, select the nonprofit filter, and see what's there.
Thank you. How does Salesforce differ from Razor's Edge NXT?
Architecturally, they're different. The Razor's Edge, the NXT, is the one that they hosted on the cloud, whereas Salesforce is actually a public multi-tenant database. So it differs, in fact, that where you can actually go in and configure the data model and extend the data model easily. You can change the user interface as well if you need to, or add to it, because it's built in 3 layers. The database level with all your tables and connections and relationships, your business logic level, and then your user interface. And because of the way it's built, you can push a button and get your data out into CSV files. It takes about 5 minutes to get your data out and move it somewhere else. So it's got a lot of those, what I call customer-friendly features in it. I think I'm not saying move from Razor's Edge or move from any other solution. I'm saying look to see what you can do in Salesforce and make an informed decision yourself.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a number of questions here about what we used to call the MIC, now we call the DEP, and how we could integrate that with Salesforce so we don't have a spreadsheet anymore. Where are we with that? And people are curious about how to do some of that, implement some of that, and see some progress in that area.
You want to start with the answer on that, Richard, and then I'll follow up.
Yeah, well, that's one of the challenges that we're working on right now, because what we've seen is that there doesn't exist a real software and data solution, which is what we've been talking with Redpath about. A lot of the software and data management solutions, well, most of them, in fact, all of them, are mostly related to the direct marketing side of the nonprofit, and not the upper end of the pipeline. Now that's starting to change, and that's kind of where we're headed in our discussions and our planning. Paul, what would you add to that? Yeah,
exactly. And one thing we've seen is you say, evolution in the Veritus approach, and the Veritus used to be the marketing impact chart, then it was the DEP and other things. We're at the point now where we're looking to see how we can add a framework for that directly onto the nonprofit cloud to help people. But at the moment, it's possible to configure that now. But we have found that every organization has a different flavor of how they want to implement it. And we don't want to get to the point where we force one organization's way on everyone else. So we're keeping a pretty open mind to it at the moment.
In addition to that, you mentioned qualifying earlier. Tim says, Veritus uses the DEP spreadsheet that is really helpful in the qualification process. How can we do away with this spreadsheet by using Salesforce instead? So in our qualification process, it's a 7-step process. We have all these touch points along the way, and they're using the DEP to track all those pieces because it's a lot of moving parts with a number of different individuals. So, you know, how could the Salesforce take over managing that and helping really get our arms around it?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I love that question. So in Salesforce, what you do is you put on all the data elements that are part of the qualification process. So you start collecting that data. You make the 7-step process a process in Salesforce to do qualification, and then you can do some really exciting things in addition to that. You can bring in wealth management information automatically. So you're enriching that donor information. You can bring information about the sort of propensity to give score. You can bring information about the donor from other data sources, and you can clean the donor information up, you know, using like NCOA databases. So if they change address, to keep it all current. And then you can put logic and rules in place that are doing some of those calculations for you in real time. So you can begin to automate a lot of that qualification process. And then finally, there's an opportunity to use some artificial intelligence that says, in the past, these type of donor profiles were always at a high propensity to be qualified and move up. It identifies those in your caseload that have a similar profile to allow you to work on the ones that are more likely to progress and be qualified. So there's a lot you can do. Data's a wonderful thing. Richard, would you like to add to that?
No, I think you said all the things that we've been thinking about. The core thing is to be able to manage a donor on an individual basis versus a kind of a group basis, which has been the pattern of the past, and have those passions and interests, communication preferences, and giving history and wealth data drive strategies and plans, and then tracking all of that. That's what's so important.
So I've got some questions about things people have heard that they're concerned about. Ruth says, I was hesitant to use engagement plans in SF when I read that moves next tasks can't be edited or deleted if the plan changes. Is that correct? If so, does that cause any problems when the next step changes for the donor?
It says everything. There will be a case sometimes where you have to configure moves management in a different way. If you find places where it's not working the way you want. And Salesforce is kind of like it's a platform with a logic layer and a user interface layer. And what you can do is you can overlay functionality on top of that with configuration to get it to behave different ways. So there is always a way to change the behavior of Salesforce with business logic and other data elements. But out of the box, you're going to see certain behaviors, and if you don't like it, that's where the magic of our team comes in.
The magic. That's where the magic happens. Another question here from Anna. The complaint I hear most frequently about Salesforce is that you either need to outsource the programming of automation and reports or have someone in your organization learn a bit of programming language. Is that true?
For the reports, as a report engine, there is a wizard-based engine. Anyone who can work a spreadsheet can create those reports and analytics. The process automation, there's a lot of very basic stuff which are like formulas in spreadsheets that most people can do. There are some advanced ones where you would need to know how to build a process flow chart, because then it will automate that flow chart inside there. It's called Flows and Process Builder. At some point, you will need an admin who begins to get familiar with those tools, so they can do that efficiently for you. And then there's also companies like us. We provide that type of support to nonprofits as well as call a friend. We try to make most of our customers as self-sufficient as possible. But there are some times where you should need to call a friend to say, if I do this, am I going to break anything? And yeah, we will have that conversation with you. And definitely, you can go under the hood with code. We discourage that with our clients unless they've got an in-house IT department with those skill sets.
I think you mentioned this earlier, but question here from Laura: Is there a wealth screening tool built in to Salesforce?
No, actually, I mentioned earlier the App Exchange. So there are tools you can buy to do that. So you don't get one you have to use. There's multiple tools. There's multiple data enhancement tools as well that you can purchase. There's some that are free, and really just matching the ones to what you need. One of the big differences with Salesforce versus a out-of-the-box solution is it's the platform with the core functionality. You can configure that to change it the way you want, and then you can add other apps to get other functionality that you need. So I always like to think of it as the big green board, the Lego set. We've got some pre-built things you can put on there, and then you can make it your own.
For those of us that played with Lego as children, we can relate to that analogy. Okay. Tina asks, reports and charts you recommend to include in our main fundraising dashboard?
Yeah, obviously, I'd love to see the pipeline report, which says, here's your goals, here's your last year's, this year's, and where you're going next year, where you're at, and at what stage are each of those cash goals being met. So there's definitely pipeline reports. The other one is, you can have a simple gauge. So you can have a report that says you're in the red, in the yellow, in the green. So all of those reports take about 5 minutes to write. And you're not limited to the number of reports. You can have reports that only you can see, only your team can see, only your leadership team can see, everyone can see. And the reports come in two types. There's list views, which are more like a data spreadsheet type view of reports. And then there are actual reports where you're building in all the filters and everything, and it's configuration again, much like a spreadsheet. But then you can have dashboard components like dials, graphs, nice little funnels, and side-by-side comparisons. And so there's a number of reports and dashboards that come pre-built. There's others that are free from the App Exchange. What we do with most of our customers is show them how to build them. And once they've created 2 or 3, we can't stop them. So it's fun.
Okay.
I think the other report that we would add in there would be how did the same donors.
Richard,
Yes.
it's doing that terrible sound thing for some reason where you're very fuzzy. It's difficult to listen to you or hear you.
I'm sorry. Is it working now or no?
No, it's not. I apologize.
Well, you better take it to the end then.
Okay, we'll take it to the end. So sorry, Richard. Another question here, Paul. Can you talk about how inclination ratings and capacity ratings in Salesforce to sort your donor portfolio and prioritize your activities?
Yeah, so all donors aren't equal, as I mentioned before. And so you can score them on a number of different things. You use propensity to give scores. You can do inclinations to work with your organization. You can do ability to give, so that might be their wealth score. And you can also have custom criteria that is just germane to your nonprofit and your mission. You can combine them to come up with a grading. Maybe the grading is A, they're the ideal donor profile, B, they could be, C, well, not so much, D, unlikely, and E, well, I'd be surprised if they become one. So some simple grading is the first order, and then you can do scoring based on those criteria, and you just can write a simple formula that creates a number, and then you just sort the report by that number. So the one at the top with the best grade and the best score is probably the one you want to call first. And the one with the worst grade and worst score, you might want to just either automatically dequalify them and bring another donor in, or do a quick reach out just to confirm that, you know, what you think you know about them, and it allows you to manage your caseload much more efficiently.
Thank you. So back to the Veritus DEP. I know in our efforts to find a system we can integrate that with, Salesforce has the most potential. I mean, that's definitely where we're looking and having conversations. I know that a number of MGOs we work with using Salesforce can upload a lot of data into their DEP more easily, like keeping up with the monthly giving and some pieces like that, so that they don't have to do that manually. And so I think we're almost there. I mean, the gift of the DEP is I can look at my 12 months with one donor and quickly change things in my planning. I can look down at all of my donors in this month and see what I'm going to be doing and kind of have the bigger picture, so I can plan ahead more easily. So we're getting there, but almost there with Salesforce and how we might recreate some of those benefits of the DEP. Sounds like to me, in my understanding and hearing what's happening with folks working with organizations. Is that also your understanding? You have anything to add to that?
Yeah, my understanding is once people let their databases go, their older ones, and their spreadsheets go, and really start to visualize that in Salesforce, they start working on executing against it versus trying to manage the data and trying to get the view they want. And what we're doing with Richard and Jeff is really taking a look at what are the most common ways they're doing that, and beginning to, you know, come up with a sort of guideline and configuration for that, so people don't have to reinvent it.
So if you're loving the DEP and you're looking to, you know, what kind of system do you want to use? Paul is a great resource for you to speak to all of that, ask questions. You've got Eric there as your resource. This recording will be sent to you via email. Feel free to share that with others, listen to that again. Any closing remarks, Paul? Thank you so much for this great presentation.
Closing remarks, I am sorry that Richard's sound went out, but his knowledge in this area of major giving and fundraising, it is so important to have a great process, because if your process is not great, automating it in a system like Salesforce and doing it at scale is dangerous, because you're not going to get the targeted fidelity you need. So as I would just say, technology is an enablement tool. It's not the be all end all, it's the people and process that's so important.
Thank you so much, Paul. Well, thank you everyone for being with us, and we look forward to seeing you again. Thank you, Paul. Everyone have a great day.
Thank you, Karen. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, Richard.